Hi everyone, this is going to be a segmentation overview based on the video that was also in your course pack called Market Attractiveness, done by Telmo. So we've taken his 5 areas of Miami and the figures that he put into place, and we've created an Excel sheet to replicate some of the formulas that he was demonstrating in the video. At this point, I strongly recommend that you grab your computer and get Excel opened up and set up this information so that you'll have it and be able to follow along with the formulas at the same time we're doing this. It's the best way to anchor the learning, pun intended here, to be able to follow along the steps as we go through them so that you're understanding it. The next step is, once we get through all of this video and we go through all the calculations, go through it a few times yourself, but the best way to really learn this is to explain it to someone else. So that would be another recommendation, is you grab a friend or classmate or a significant other and run through this process and explain to them what each of the formulas are and how you got to the end results and why you would choose what you would choose. All right, so pause here if you want to go get set up, and otherwise we will get going. So if you notice up here at the top, we've listed, of course, our locations. We've also listed the areas that this particular company was considering when choosing division to go look into. So we have average income, we have consumer spending, population, average age, and competitors by zip code. All right, so at this point in our particular situation, we're going to assign a weight or a value or importance for each of those categories. And in this case, we just happened to select these numbers. So we felt like income was the most expensive or most important, followed by consumer spending, population, and then age, and then competitors by zip code. So first, before we can do anything else, we want to make sure how much does all that equal. Okay, so for those of you that are not as Excel friendly, just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's quickly redo this sum here. So we'll go over here to our auto sum. We're taking just the basic sum, and it's automatically going to take the rows there in front of it. We just hit the quick enter button. We have our sum. Now the next thing we want to do is actually convert those into a percentage, which is why we need this total. So let's do that formula real quick. We'll start here in the 6. So now we're going to make sure that we have our percentages over here on the second row, so we can do some more calculations with them. So first we're going to go over here and grab our average. We've got this row. We're going to divide it by that row to get our average. So you see it's 30%. Just in case we want to make sure we have covered all of our bases, we're going to go ahead and add a $ in front of each of these so that we make sure we keep the right formula anchored across. All right, so you see we have 30%, 25%, 20%, 15%, and 10%. Now I've added the default view of a row probably is your general category, general numbers. But as you can see, that gives us a decimal, and we really want percentage. So you can go ahead and click here on the percentage. There's, of course, several ways to get to this. This is just a quick icon button to click, or you can also do the pull down menu and get percentage this way. We're going to go ahead and take off all the extra decimals because these are all whole numbers. So there again, this helps us with our formulas that we'll be doing for the rest. This tells us that we've got a stronger importance of the average income versus the average age. Now if you notice here, we've got two different kind of values that we're comparing. These are both monetary amounts, but these are numbers. These are population and ages, and then just a category of zip code. So to really do this formula, we're going to have to borrow from some of our old stat classes and reconfigure this so that now we can compare them apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. So the next step we need to do is our z-score, or an average of each of the rows. All right, so first we're going to come up here, get our average. And as you can see, it's already automatically grabbed all the cells that it thinks we want in that formula, and then enter. So you have your first average. Okay, then because this formula is going to remain the same across all 5 categories, we are going to just drag that copies the formula all the way across, and bingo, we're ready. However, notice that it automatically defaulted to think that everything was a numerical value. And of course, we have population and average age and competitors, which are not dollar amounts. So we need to go through and change these 3 into non-dollar amount, which would be just general numbers. And we'll add the comma figures so that it's easier to read. We've got our 2 decimals, and we're ready for the next section. And just to make sure, you see up here, you can either add decimals or take away decimals. We're going to keep it at 2 just to keep it very standard. Next, we need to do our standard deviation. Now, of course, there's many versions of Excel, and you all have various different proficiencies with Excel. So I'm just going to explain one way, and you use whichever way makes the most sense to you. We need to find our standard deviation formula. You can do the equal sign and start typing, and there it is right there. So we want to use this one. And then we're going to grab our formulas up here and enter. So this gives us now our first column of information for the standard deviation. And since it's going to be the same formula all the way across, I'm just going to drag it over in the box, and we've got it. Now I have currently the decimal set at 4 places. Again, you can increase or decrease, but 4 is probably a good number right there. All right, our next calculation is the z-score. So for here, we're going to take the value, or our number, minus the mean, which is the average, and divide that by the standard deviation. So to do that, I think the easiest way is to manually enter this calculation. So again, we're going to take the value minus the mean and divide that by the standard deviation. So in this formula, we've got our equal sign. We're going to go ahead and put parentheses around the value minus the mean. So we'll come up here, grab the value, add the subtract sign, get the mean, add the parentheses, and then the divide sign by the standard deviation. And that should give us this lovely little number right here. Now in this case, before we are ready to copy over the formulas down and across, I need to make sure that I'm taking the mean and the average from the correct row. Okay, so I need this mean and average to be reflected in this average income column, and then this mean and average to be reflected in this consumer spending column. So to do that, I need to go back to where we were talking about the $ anchoring. I'm just going to put a $ here in front of the mean and in front of the standard deviation. Row 13 in this case and row 14 in this case. Okay, so we add that. And then as we pull our formula across, it's going to grab the correct version of each. And the same with going down. So now let's take a minute and look at these z-score numbers, see what they are telling us. Okay, so I'm just having to pick this one. It seems like it's fairly close to 1. So remember, our score was looking at the difference between the mean and the actual value. And as we can see here, it's approximately 1 standard deviation away from the value, okay? So as you notice, the standard deviation is just about 1,600. And if you were to do this subtraction, 56,200 minus 40,700, it's almost about 16,000. So now let's take a look at this one. This value is almost at 0. So if we go up here to our value is 41,000. Our mean is almost 41,000. So when you minus the standard deviation, it comes almost zeroed out because they're that close. And then looking at this one category here, this is almost 2 standard deviations above the mean. So now for this section, I need to bring the weights from up here down here just to keep the proximity closer when I'm doing the next round of calculations. So now I want to bring these same weights down here for proximity for my next round of calculations. Okay, and in this case I want to bring the formula down as well so that in case something changes up here, it's also changing down here. So in this case I've got the equal sign. I'm going to grab that particular cell, add the dividing sign, and come over here to the total. So now I get that percentage. Now again, if it shows up as a decimal, you can come up here to the percentage sign. I'm going to add my dollar sign, and then as I pull the formula across, I've got all the same weights as I do up here. Now let's say, for example, at one point we're going to come back in and we're going to change the importance level of consumer spending. Maybe we're going to add that as a 7. So watch what happens. It changes both sets of percentages with one number change. Okay, so I'm going to change that back and we'll be ready for our next section. All right, in this section, I want to create the value of the weighted scores and populate this area so I can compare the weighted scores versus the unweighted scores. So for this calculation, we're going to add our equal sign. We're going to grab this particular cell, and then we're going to add the multiply sign and the percentage weight. And there we go. Now you notice in this case it picked up the percentage, so I'm going to just come back up here and change it to a general number. So now it represents a similar number here. Now in this case we need to do some anchoring. So I'm going to anchor just the row. Add that dollar sign right before the 25. And then as I pull this across and then down to fill in the calculations, I'm going to get the correct calculations. So now in this case, you're probably wondering, what are all these numbers telling us? Okay, essentially, we're taking the z-score numbers, these values, and we're now adding the weight of importance into these numbers. So as you can see, we've said that average income is much more important than the competitors by zip code. Okay, so if you'll notice, this number is now significantly different than the unweighted or z-score number, and the weighted number here of zip codes is significantly different from the previous unweighted score. And now at this point I'm ready to get just a basic sum over here. So I'm going to come up here to my formulas, auto sum, and so I hit the enter key, and now I'm ready to get the box and just, whoops, I missed. Drag it down, so now I have my formulas. Now I'm actually going to add this same column again, and I'll show you in just a minute why. We're going to show two values, one with the long decimals and one with just 2 decimals. Okay, so again, I go up here to auto sum. Now, of course, it thinks I want this column too, and I'm going to use my shift and arrow key to subtract that column. So now I have this same one here, and again I can drag it down, and then using my decimal icon here I can reduce it down to 2. Now so it's the same number, but now it's expressed in a little bit more visually manageable manner. So we see we have a -24, a 39, -29, -19, and 33. So it's just a little bit easier to read than this column with all the extra decimal points. And now we're ready to start making some evaluations from our data here. So assuming that our data set was accurate to begin with, and of course our formulas, assuming those were also accurate, and agreeing with these particular weights that we put on each of these categories as far as importance, the 30%, 25, 20, 15, and 10, then this is what we're looking at. So you see here, Kendall has the actual highest score of 0.39, which tells us that that's probably our best market to look at based on what we have set up as importance and categories. You'd follow next by Coral Gables, looks like it's pretty good. And then we go, since these are negative numbers, we're going to go in reverse order of those. So negative 19 would be North Miami, and that would be next. Then negative 24 is Miami Beach, and followed lastly by negative 29 South Miami. Now the negative numbers doesn't mean they're necessarily bad. They just not as strong of a number as the positive numbers. Now just for fun, let's do a little bit of comparison between the weighted category and the unweighted category. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this column, or these two columns of formulas, and I'm going to paste the formulas up here. So now we can do a little bit of a comparison to see what would happen between the weighted and the unweighted. Now let's look at Kendall. In the weighted, it's 0.39. Here the weighted's considerably higher. And so here in our next example, originally Coral Gables would have been the next best place to go to. But according to the unweighted, that's not the case. Miami Beach shows up here as being the next best place to go to. So we would have had a completely different outcome if we hadn't have run the weighted importance formula. Now again, this is one example. So what would happen though if you decided in your company that now the competitors per zip code were actually more important? So let's look and see what that does to our formula. So we switch it from 2 to 4. And let's see if that changes any of our weights. Well, we still, in the weighted category, we still have Kendall as the highest. And the unweighted category, looking like a few changes there as well. Let's see what happens if we give that even more importance. And again, you see Kendall is higher and Kendall is higher, but some of the other factors are going to fluctuate in between. So switching it back. Again, there's not necessarily a right or wrong call here. At some point, someone in your organization is going to have to put this weighted value or importance value numbers together, and that's what is the basis of the remainder of the formulas to help you all make those kinds of data-driven marketing decisions when you're doing segmentation types of promotions and campaigns based on what your product is, what your industry are, who your buyers are, how your buyers react to these different aspects. And again, this is one way of how we look at the marketing strategy or the marketing efforts, which is basically your 4 Ps. So that wraps up our segmentation example. I strongly encourage you all to go through this a few times, practice doing the formulas, practice teaching them to someone else, practice explaining this by basically following along with the video and the sample video by Telmo. Practice this so that when you are in your company, among your friends, around your professionals, you can bust out these formulas, and you can also know what to do when you see them on a quiz. So look forward to next time.